Ephraim, you are a Nazi hunter. What does it mean, a Nazi hunter?
Nazi hunter is someone who tries to help bring Nazi war criminals to justice. And the way, people ask me, what's your job? I say, I'm 1/3 detective, 1/3 historian, and 1/3 political lobbyist. So let me explain briefly.
Yes.
Detective to find the people, because most countries are not looking for them.
Exactly.
Historian to find the evidence, documents and witnesses to help build the case, which brings me to the third point, which is very often there's no political will in the country which should put this person on trial, bring them to justice. We have to work very hard to get the countries which either sent the person to commit the crime or the crime was committed on their territory to bring them to justice.
You know, after World War II, after the Holocaust, not many people were looking for finding the criminals, the ones that they do. There were some who say that we will put them, we will have a judge, we will have something. But after that, nobody cared. It was like it's supposed to be, we have to find them, we have to bring them to justice. Why do you think the world didn't have in his mind to bring these criminals to justice?
First of all, the process itself was a very painful process for the countries involved. And in some cases, an absolutely impossible task. So listen, I don't really want to devote a lot of time to giving excuses for the Germans or the Austrians, but if you think about what Germany had to do at the end of the war, there was no way on earth that they could possibly bring all the Nazis to justice. So they had to make decisions, they had to prioritize. So I'll give you an example that relates to today. Because the number of people was so large, they decided we're going to focus only on officers. So take the Einsatzgruppen, for example. There's mobile killing units. If you focus only on officers, you're ignoring thousands of people, hundreds of people, who almost day in and day out were busy murdering Jews and other enemies of the Reich.
Yes.
You're going to ignore them? How can you walk away from someone who spent practically an entire period murdering thousands and thousands and thousands of people? But that's what happened. Now, ironically, that's why today we're still in a position to help bring people to justice, and because of the change in German prosecution policy, so to give you a concrete example, in the last couple of months, I helped expose 3 members of Einsatzgruppe C, which is the unit that carried out the murders at Babi Yar. It's the biggest massacre in the history of the Shoah. Over 2 days, September 29th, 30th, 1941, which was Yom Kippur, by the way, 33,771 Jews were murdered in Kiev, outside Kiev, in a ravine called Babi Yar.
In how many days?
33,771.
In how many days?
2 days.
In 2 days. It's like, how to do it? It's incredible.
It's almost impossible to understand. But I found 3 of the people who served in that unit alive and well and living in Germany. And now they're in pre-trial investigations thanks to our research in tracking them down.
For many people, when you spoke about officers, and now the people that did the massacres also, but for some people they will say they were not guilty, they were following orders, there was a war. How can explore, because maybe Mengele, maybe Eichmann, they were in charge, Hitler, but why the office, why the soldiers, why the people?
From the very beginning of the post-war period, the process of prosecution, the superior orders defense was categorically rejected by international law and by every single court with one exception. And that's the court in Canada, ironically. Okay, because if you accept a assertion that because I got an order from someone who was a higher rank than me, basically you end up with one Nazi war criminal. Because everyone could say, someone higher than me gave me an order.
Exactly.
So,
or will say, if I didn't do it, somebody else will do it, and if I didn't do it, they are going to kill me and my family.
Not true. That's categorically
so that can
not
explain
true.
it and can...
Categorically not true. As a matter of fact, there's no documented case of a German who refused to kill Jews who was murdered, who was executed by the Germans. That's a very important point.
Yes.
And in Lithuania, I think there was one case and there were other people who also refused to shoot Jews, and they were not executed. They might have been sent to a different unit, they might have been punished in some other way, but no one, with one exception in Lithuania and in Germany,
Right.
not one person lost his life for refusing to kill Jews.
Right. So they are guilty also.
Of course. Listen, they're not, listen, if you remember the Demyanjuk trial, okay? When Demyanjuk was put on trial, people said, what do you want from this guy? He wasn't the commander of Sobibor, he wasn't the deputy commander of Sobibor, he wasn't even an officer. But what people don't understand is without people like Demyanjuk, the scope of the Holocaust would have been much less than it was. Because you had your Demyanjuks out there in all the death camps, in all the Einsatzgruppen, in all the concentration camps, and in various other units, 6 million Jews were murdered by the Nazis, and many hundreds of thousands of other peoples, whether it's gypsies, homosexuals, etc., enemies of the Reich, were also murdered. These are the people who carried out the murders.
So you think, these people, almost all of them, they have to be dead.
Almost all
All of them.
But,
They may be very old of them.
1 second.
Yes.
The most dramatic development in our work has been the extension of life expectancy. In other words, if 73 years after the end of World War II were 1920,
Yes.
not in 2018, okay, 1920, you'd be right, all of them would be dead already. There
Yes.
wouldn't be any survived, maybe one or two, a couple.
Right.
But because of the extension of life expectancy and the fact that most of the Nazi war criminals live in countries with good medical care, here the people I found are in their 90s.
All right.
And they're not only in their 90s, they're healthy.
All right. Do you think the most important thing about catching them, about bringing them to justice, it's to punish them or to bring what they did again to the newspapers, to the what is the most important thing? Because if they already have 73 years of healthy living with their
both
families.
Important, okay? Of course, the trial is extremely important, okay? I want to tell you something. Most people are not really fully aware of the extent of the mass murders carried out by the Einsatzgruppen.
Yes.
The iconic images of the Shoah are Auschwitz, Dachau, Bergen-Belsen, and that's what most people think about. But 1.5 million Jews were killed by bullets, shot near their homes. Who did that? The Einsatzgruppen did it, together with the local helpers. So these trials are super important. There hasn't been a trial about the Einsatzgruppen since, I think, 1960. These are the daily killers. This is in a certain sense, it's much worse than the death camps, because in the death camps, it was 1 or 2 or 3, 4, 5 people who actually committed the murders.
Yes.
And here, it's all of them. All of them were involved. All of them did the shooting.
In 40 years of Nazi hunter, of being after these criminals, have you have some disappointment? Have you have a very bad moment? Which one? Because maybe you catch somebody, bring it to justice, and the judge said, we cannot process him. Or, I don't know, which was your worst moment? You said, I want to leave this because this is a loss of time with the community.
I devoted almost 5 years to bringing a Hungarian Nazi war criminal collaborator to justice who's responsible for participation in the murder of thousands of Jews, Serbs, and Gypsies in Yugoslavia and in and around the city of Novi Sad. His name was Sandor Capiro. He was an officer, and he was among the people who carried out these murders. And we finally found him. We tracked him down in 2006. We found him. And it took 5 years to get the Hungarians to put him on trial. In the middle, he sued me for libel, okay? And he was eventually put on trial in July of 2011. The first trial in...
You catch him on 2006, and it came to trial till... All right, we understand.
Okay.
We have to focus that.
Do you know why he was put on trial? He was put on trial because Hungary got the rotating presidency of the European Union in January of 2011.
All right.
So then they charged him, okay?
All right.
In any event, he was the first Hungarian Nazi collaborator put on trial since democracy was resumed in Hungary, okay? And the only one so far. And what happened was that he and his fellow officers had been put on trial in Budapest A trial which began in December of 1943 and continued till January 44, but they were charged not with murder or genocide. They were charged in that trial with carrying out an unauthorized operation. In other words, they did not get permission to do these operations, to kill these people. Okay, as a matter of fact, the murders in Novi Sad were stopped on January 23rd, 1942, when a light plane landed on the Danube, which was frozen over because it was minus 30 degrees, and two Hungarian officers from Budapest got out and said, "What on earth are you doing? You have no authorization." This is after 1,280 people were murdered by these people.
With no authorization, let's say.
With no authorization, okay?
Right.
So what the court did in this trial, now, because they were put on trial previously, we knew exactly what Capiro had done. We knew he was in charge of a certain quarter of the city, a place in which a lot of the Jews in the city of Novi Sad lived. We know that 6 people were murdered by his men during the roundups alone. And the others were marched to this theater where a committee of Hungarian officers would decide if any of them should be released. And when the people who were not released were marched to the Danube, and row by row they were shot, they were murdered. So the judge begins the trial by saying no evidence from the trial in 1943-44 will be accepted, because what happened was when the Nazis invaded Hungary on March 19, 1944, and they put pressure on the Hungarians to cancel the verdicts. And all those people who were sitting waiting, some of them to be executed, others to be put in jail, they were exonerated, they were returned to service, and then the judge says we can't use any of the evidence.
All right.
So at the end of the trial he said, Capiro was acquitted. He's not innocent, but you didn't prove he's guilty.
All right. Yes.
No?
I have to be...
I cried.
Yes.
Not that day, the day afterwards in the airport, all of a sudden it hit me, and I felt as if I had let down the victims.
Explain me.
I worked 5 years
Yes.
to bring them justice.
And to bring them from 206 to 12 to 11, and I don't know, it's like, how can they do it? After what they did, it's not explainable. It's lost.
Political will. You need political will to prosecute.
How does it work? You find somebody in a little bit way. How does it work? You are investigating somebody.
Let me explain to you
How is
something.
the process?
Let me explain something. The biggest problem we face is that we can't work like the police.
Yes.
Police start with a crime,
Yes.
then they try and figure out who did it, right?
Exactly.
But since 99% of the criminals of the Holocaust are already dead,
Yes.
if we were to do that, we'd end up wasting 99% of our time and our
Exactly.
resources, which we don't have that
Yes.
much of anyway, okay? So we have to start with a tip, information,
Yes.
about a person who's alive, healthy enough to stand trial, who may or may not be a Nazi war criminal. And then we have to determine whether or not he is or she is or isn't.
And after you find him, you investigate his history, then you
We turn it over to the government.
to the government in that country.
In the country where we think he should be put on trial.
All right.
Either the country, so Capiro, for example,
If you find him in
could have been
Argentina, he has to be tried in
he could have
Austria.
been tried in Serbia.
Yes.
But we thought it's more important to put him on trial in Hungary, which has sent him to commit the murders.
All right. So you have to also work with the two governments, if you find him in
Work with
Argentina,
both
to bring him back
Right.
to Serbia, or to happen what
Listen,
it happened with Eichmann.
we had a big dilemma in the case of Dinko Šakić, who was the commandant of Jasenovac, one of the commandants of Jasenovac. There were 6 different countries which in theory could have prosecuted him, and we decided to send him to Croatia because we felt that Croatia was the country where they needed the trial the most. If we were worried about the verdict, we would have sent him to Serbia. He would have been hanging from the highest tree in Belgrade after he'd been convicted. Instead, we sent him to Croatia, but he was convicted in Croatia as well. And Tudjman was the president of Croatia, and he had denied the Shoah in the book.
Right. And tell me, we talk about the most disappointment moment with this Hungarian. What is the biggest or most satisfaction you have in this period? That somebody that you find and say,
Hold on a second. You were terrific.
he was the hero, he was the best one.
You were the best one. No,
We are talking
seriously.
about Samra, that was here in
David Samra.
David
Kol
Samra.
hakavod.
He's a hero. Come here, David. Come with him, hero.
No, Bertzino, kol hakavod.
Thank you.
All right. Sit there. No. Let's make a photo. We are in the middle of an interview, but let's do a photo. It's important because both of you are heroes in our times. So, 1 second. In the middle of an interview, a photo. All right. Okay. You were telling me which one was the best moment.
Okay, so listen. I would say to you there's three really special moments.
Yes.
One was when Dinko Shakic was convicted.
Yes.
He was the commander of Jasenovac, one of the worst camps in Europe. A camp in which 100,000 people were murdered.
That we don't know so much about this camp. It's not so
right. It's not that well known. It was called the Auschwitz of the Balkans.
All right.
Okay. It was a camp run by Croatians. Majesh. Okay. It was run by Croatians. There wasn't a single German or Austrian there.
Yes.
Okay. That was one very high point. If the people I found now from the Einsatzgruppen will be put on trial, for me it'll be the biggest victory. Okay?
All right.
And the third thing that I did that is not exactly the same, I wrote a book with Ruta Vanagaita, who's the Lithuanian author, who discovered 4 years ago that her family was involved in killing Jews. Okay? And we wrote a book about the complicity of Lithuanians in the crimes of the Shoah. And it became a bestseller in Lithuania and created an enormous scandal in a country where they're lying about the Shoah. Not to say that the Shoah didn't happen. They say it happened. The Germans and Austrians came and murdered our Jews, but they try and minimize or hide the role played by Lithuanians, and they try and say that communism was just as bad as Nazism.
What do you think it's the paper of the work that it has to be the Jewish community around the world now? The word about holocausto, where, like we talk, getting out or living without criminals and getting without survivors. Right. So it's hard to say. And sometimes it will be like part of the history. What is the part?
We have been preparing for this moment for 50 years already. Yes. So don't think for a minute that we're not ready. We are ready. We have tens of thousands of video testimonies. It's true that it's not the same as having a live survivor. And believe me, the survivors all go to Gan Eden, it'll be a tremendous loss for the Jewish people. But their stories have been recorded. And they're for posterity. This is to the Ad Sof HaDorot. Okay? That's number one. But now the perpetrators are gone also, right?
Yes.
So the fight is moving from the courtroom to the history books, to the narrative. And this is the fight that we're fighting in Eastern Europe. The biggest danger we face today is not denial, because the fight against denial has been won in the Western world.
Yes.
Not in the Arab world, not in the Muslim world.
Yes.
But in the Western world, there's no mainstream normative political party or social organization that disseminates Holocaust denial. And the defeat of David Irving in the trial against Lipstadt was a tremendous victory because he was the most dangerous denier. Okay? But now, for the last 25 years, the peoples of Eastern Europe are changing the narrative. They're hiding their own crimes. And as I explained, they're also
it's like Poland saying, Poland or Germany or Croatia saying, we didn't do anything.
Bibi said, when they passed the Polish law, Israel will not allow Holocaust distortion. For 25 years, we didn't do a thing, Israel. I say it with embarrassment as an Israeli by choice.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
So that Polish law is the best thing that ever happened because now everyone's aware of what's going on.
So, to finish, what is your message to the world now and to the Jewish people?
Listen, the biggest challenge we face is the challenge of assimilation, intermarriage, and the disappearance of Jews. Okay? America is on the verge of losing 3 million Jews. America is a country where only 20% of the Jewish kids get any Jewish education, and that includes people who get 1 hour a week. Okay? You listening to me?
Yes, yes, yes.
So, America is the biggest graveyard of the Jewish people, not Auschwitz.
All right.
And this is the tragedy. What the Nazis didn't do to us, we're doing to ourselves.
Thank you very much, Ibrahim.